Ideasmyth Pitch-Palooza. And we have a fantastic baker's dozen of projects to present to you tonight. One thing that I have found over the years, and one reason why I do these events, is that most creative professionals are really, really happy to work away in their garrets, and they're terrified to send anything out. I mean, the worst thing that happens is if I see somebody a year later like, well, I did the revision of the novel that we discussed, and I did my cover letter, and I haven't sent it to one agent. So I've deliberately chosen these wonderful people because not only are they super accomplished and very, very experienced, and you're going to be blown away by their insights, but because they're really nice. And you'll see that most people in this industry are really nice, and they really want good content. So if you have done your job, they will want to talk to you. So as you can see in your programs, we have 3 people from different sides of the industry that really makes a book. It's really one of those terrible, it's not accurate that a book just, yes, the book was written by one person, but it never gets to the marketplace just because that person wrote it. Even with self-publishing, you still have people on that side formatting it and laying it out, etc. So we have a literary agent, now turned successful memoirist, Priscilla Gilman here. Then we have Rita Rosenkrantz, who has her own literary agency and has had it for many, many years. And Liz Rosenthal, who is speaking to the branding side of things. So basically, like how you come up with ideas, get it out there. Priscilla also is very, very accomplished in terms of getting things into journalism pieces and teaching, and one of the best platforms out there. You're going to love her Facebook feed if you're not already on it. And Rita has, if you see on her website, so many different stripes of authors, and I've known some of her clients who adore her. And there are a lot of wonderful agents out there, but it's very unusual to feel like you really have a friend and a true advocate and an agent like Rita. And Liz is somebody who just spouts creative ideas. You can't help it, and she's very funny. So I don't need to tell you that. You'll see that very soon enough. We got sort of a Charlie's Angels supernova here. We got a redhead, a brunette, and a blonde. I hope that wasn't seemed insulting or demeaning, because I always wanted to be a Charlie's Angel myself. So I don't like repeating what's in the program, so what I'm going to do to kick off the evening is that each one of the panelists is going to give a little pitch highlight from their career, or talk about pitching in their career, and then we'll segue into Amy Thomas, who I'll introduce in a moment. So, Priscilla, why don't you kick off with your life in pitching, or one pitch. Go ahead.
I can't really see anyone, but I am smiling at you. The lights are in my eyes. So I have a slightly unusual career trajectory. I just sort of did it in the ladies' room for someone that I just met. I went straight from undergraduate into the PhD program in English at Yale, and I did my PhD there, and I was an English professor there for 2 years, and then I went to Vassar, and I taught at Vassar for 4 years as a tenure-track professor, and then quit to become a literary agent. And as a literary agent, I was working alongside one of my best friends from Yale grad school. Her name is Tina Bennett, and she's now at William Morris Endeavor. But she was my best friend first year in graduate school. And she dropped out of graduate school after a year. And she didn't really know New York City or publishing at all. She was from Pennsylvania, from a small town. And we went out to coffee, and she said, I'm sort of interested in working in publishing. And my mother's Lynn Nesbitt, who founded Jane Chloe Nesbitt, an agency in the city. And I said, over the years, so many people have said to me, can I speak to your mom? And I'm always like, and no. I'm sort of the gatekeeper, because everybody has a manuscript and everybody wants to talk to my mom. But in this case, I thought, you know what, Tina is amazing. And so I pitched Tina to my mom. And they didn't have any job openings, but they said, oh, she sounds so incredible. I said, she's just brilliant, and she's got wide-ranging interests, and she's really passionate. I think you should meet with her. So in 1994, my mother met with her. She hired her. She's one of the top agents in the world. And then I became an agent, and Malcolm Gladwell, and Laura Hillenbrand, and lots of other amazing clients. So I'm very honored that she represents me. But I was talking with Victoria, with whom I went to high school with her.
And we have the same birthday.
And I was talking to her about pitching, and I said, it's funny because with my book, my older son is on the autism spectrum, and my memoir is called The Anti-Romantic Child, and it uses poetry, particularly romantic poetry, which I specialized in as a graduate student, to talk about my experience having a child that was very different from my expectation of what my child was going to be. And I was giving talks at literature conferences, I was giving talks at early childhood events, and Tina, just being my friend, said, would you share, can I read your talks? I just want to read them. And she read them and she said, I think you should take the literature talks that you're giving and combine them with the talks that you're giving at early childhood conferences and put them together into a memoir. And that seemed completely odd to me. As a former academic, to write about one's life is very daunting and not something that you do. You're always taking yourself out of your writing as an academic. And so my book sort of developed organically. I just shared the talks with her. She sent a version of one of them out as a magazine article. It was rejected at she tried 25, 30 places with this 30-page piece. And then she said to me, I think this is a book. And I was shocked and when she went out with it to publishers, it was a 60-page piece of writing. There was no pitching at all. It was just a piece of writing. She didn't submit a pitch letter. She just submitted it as a piece of writing. It went to auction, it sold to Harper. I was completely shocked. So this is an example of how sometimes the best pitch is no obviously pitching language, but it's also an example of how relationships that you build over the course of your life are the most unexpected places. She was my friend from English graduate school. We were in a seminar, on the Romantic Poets together. She ends up in Asian. She's my best friend also. And she ends up working for my mother. It's all of these things that I think one of the most important things that I can say in my experience as both an agent and a writer is that personal relationships matter. And no matter how good your pitch is, if you're not a good, honorable, decent, honest person, it will come back to bite you in the end. And at Janko Nesbitt, we used to have things like, we used to call them red flags with potential clients. If their pitches were great, if they called more than once a day. There's certain things that potential clients do. And I'm just, I think that putting in the work over time, Tina was able to vouch for me to publishers because I had written a dissertation. One wouldn't think that she said she could write a book. She's written a dissertation. I had no track record. I'd never published an article in the mainstream press when my book came out. And now I'm publishing, doing tons of journalism. So I think those are the 3 lessons I would say to pull out of my experience. 1, personal relationships. 2, sometimes the best pitch is no obvious pitch. Right? And 3, be open to kind of unexpected conjunctions of your interests. And you might think, okay, how could I bring together this aspect of my life? Talking about Wordsworth and his depiction of childhood, and together with my interest in being an advocate for children. And I brought those 2 things together, and that's what made an original project.
And if I could add to that, I think you have to accept that really all career advances happen by pitching. So even if you're not the one doing it, you can have an outsourced pitch mule for you, but you have to pick that person to do that for you well. And in this lovely relationship, she pitched Tina to her mom and then had this unexpected, reciprocal, wonderful, unexpected thing. So.
Unexpected joy. That's the title of the book.
And I have to say, I read the book in one sitting. It's fantastic. And I think, too, just as a little aside, for those of you who are thinking about memoirs are still getting published. It's a very, very popular genre, but I do think it's very important to bring some content that's very unique. You can be a wonderful writer and talk about a conventional transition in life, and that could still sell, but it's just much more challenging. If you have very unique interests, as Priscilla did, it really makes it stand out. So, and I know every single one of you has it, so I think sometimes people think, I should just focus on my divorce, I should just focus on my kids. Really allow the weirdness and the combination to make you unique. It's not only smart, but it's commercial. It really distinguishes you in the field. Rita?
Hi there, my name is Rita Rosenkrantz. My agency is Rita Rosenkrantz Literary Agency. I'm based on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I too am blinded by the light, not to steal from the Bruce. Almost my entire career has been in publishing, with a limited exception working for others of Greater Los Angeles in my formative years. And so I've witnessed and experienced the gyrations, and those gyrations seem to be escalating with increasing mergers that are redefining the industry in a way that is hard to keep track of, let alone understand what the full impact will be. I work solo, and the beauty of that, having worked with large corporations starting out at Random House and Scribner's, then Crown, now owned by Random House, is that I can call my own shots, and I can say yes when there's a project that I know will be under the radar, but that moves me in a particular way that I feel is worth investing in. And that, I would say, is the basis of my career, taking those kinds of chances. I respond to all the mail that comes to me mostly via email today. The way I describe it in the directories is I look for familiar topics presented freshly, lesser known topics presented commercially. There's got to be a vital reason why that book is publishable. It's saying something that will be of interest to a public we understand has parameters, there's a demographic. Presumably with an author, written by an author who is well paired to the topic for professional or personal reasons, so I don't have to oversell it or overstate why that pairing is taking place. Some of the projects I've handled include a book called Forbidden Fruit, Love Stories from the Underground Railroad. I met that author, Betty Doremus, a Pulitzer finalist, who had selected a topic that had been well-mined, the Underground Railroad, but found an angle that had been underwritten about, and what is more commercial than love. So my heart was stirred, and ultimately Atria published that book, which has been optioned for the stage and screen. With luck, it will be made into something filmic. But in a way, these footnotes, these lost to history expressions that an author comes upon because they have access to an archive or a point of view that hasn't been released before, and suddenly it makes sense for public consumption. That interests me. So those quieter voices, not necessarily the obvious bestseller, not necessarily the Tom Moakes of the world, Lynn Nesbitt's author, and if only I could manage that. But in fact, my list is quieter. It's not necessarily recognizable names unless you follow those categories, but they're important to me because they do make a contribution to a category, and they speak to me, and they deserve my attention, if not my perseverance, especially in a case where it's not an obvious sell, and so I've got to work overtime to find the fit. But those authors who are well-tuned to the experience of publishing, which is either automatic and fantastic, where there's an auction situation, or more usually a situation where there's a longer haul and you're piling up rejections and you're flummoxed because you thought everything right to prepare a proposal that was saleable, but it's not selling. Well, what then? And then you have to really summon up the inner strength combined with the agent's perseverance to get to the finish line. And that, I think, is really the experience that defines me over the many years. But when a project works, it's really a kind of hallelujah moment, and worth celebrating, reinforcing that your instincts were right even though they didn't get it right away, and when it sells in the marketplace, even better. So that's why I'm here.
Now, before we go over to Liz, we've discovered that she's not going to be filmable in the dark. So we're going to have an awkward but brief moment when we're going to move over this table. Let's see. Then we get some lighting. All right. Does that work, Mr. Videographer? All right. And Liz, if it's more or less awkward, you just take it into your hands. Mademoiselle, do you want to talk about a pitch, or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm Liz Rosenthal, and I work in advertising at an agency called Pitch-Palooza Taylor. A lot of names there. And I am a writer. I'm a copywriter. Now, you work in the industry for a number of years and you become a creative director. And it's true. I mean, like, there's so many people in my industry on the creative side and the business side who are just incredibly creative people and have thousands of great ideas all the time. But it's nothing if you can't express it clearly, and if you can't express it like that to an audience that isn't listening to you and probably doesn't care what you have to say and you've heard it all before. So it's really like a great, working in advertising, obviously it's all about expressing your idea. Not having the idea, but how do you explain it to somebody else so you can get them to put millions of their dollars behind it. And I mean, and there's really no better thing that I've learned, especially of late, is the elevator pitch. I mean, I literally work in a building on the 29th floor with an elevator. And recently I was working on a project, and it was one of these things where you work really hard, and then all of a sudden something else comes into your brain, and it's like, that's it. That's, the eureka moment where you can express exactly what you want to say in like 10 words or less. And I was, I realized, like, I could get literally in an elevator in less than 3 floors, explain my idea to somebody, and I had them laughing. At least a little. Nothing out. If they weren't listening, they didn't care. Most of them are. But it's just in that state. But it is like really about, I think the pitch can also, in some ways, finding your pitch can sort of evaluate your idea and how good of an idea it is. Can I tell you about this idea in 3 floors? I mean, yes, the elevator pitch, we've heard it's a cliche, but it is for a reason. Because that is really the key to selling anything.
Can I set you up to talk about the pitch for the award you just got?
For the what?
The award you just got?
Yeah,
talk about that pitch?
Sure. I mean, I recently did a project for a product called Z-Quill, which is NyQuil without the cold medicine. It's a sleep aid. And they got hit too. That is why people use NyQuil to sleep. So let's market it like this, and it's gone off the charts. And whether you care, what your feelings are about using sleep aids and stuff like that. In my business, you have to suspend that and just do your job and find the insight, find the human thing. And it was definitely, it had a great insight to begin with for the brand, is because which is sleep is a beautiful thing, and you may have seen some of the commercials on TV if you watch TV, but it's a wonderful insight because we live in a world, it came out of a very human thing, is that we live in a world where it's a badge not to have sleep, and sleeping is looked upon as a weakness.
So it's like competitive sleep deprivation.
Exactly. Well, I was up till 4 a.m. Well, I was up till 5 a.m. Well, I didn't sleep for 6 weeks. And we do this, and like at work, like that somehow this is going to make you perform better. You need sleep, and and of course there's all the studies about the truly successful people take their 20-minute power nap, and I mean sleep is something we need. We are human, and so. I had come up with all these ideas, and I was actually very agitated because other parts of my job were kind of making me mad. And I was on my way to a meeting to present other ideas I had for this project. And then it occurred to me, wow, what if we bored people to sleep? Like, what if that's how we got? We're so committed to getting people to sleep, we'll bore them to sleep. And that was it. It's like, that became the pitch. I walked into this meeting with nothing prepared and said, we have some stuff to show you, but here's the thought. What if at Z-Quill, we're so committed to making sure that you get your sleep, that even if you don't have our product, we will bore you to sleep, and here's an 800 number you can call. and to be gently bored to sleep. And we basically came up with a phone prompt of 9 things of a wide variety of incredibly boring subjects. Since what bores me, may not bore my panel members or you, and so we had things like, press 1 for a brief history of buckets. Press 2 for a passage from Proust. And just really, that we had a woman who, to hear, press 4 to hear what someone ate today. So it's just like a variety, somebody reading a standard rental lease. And and it's sort of, and it was really fun, and it was really fun and exciting, but also like it was interesting to execute because you're straddling this line of ultimately trying to make something that gets out there and gets heard, but what you're working with is being boring. So how do you make boring exciting? And it's just, those types of things. And I remember we were recording the phone prompts, and we had an actor reading the Proust. We actually, licensed the first translation that is public. We didn't have to license it. It's actually public domain by a hair. And I had the actor reading it, and the recording was going on in LA, and it was going on in New York, and I was in LA working on another project on the phone screaming, "It's too compelling! It's too boring! I want it flat!" And it was just like, and it's just sort of, you have your idea, it comes to you, like it can come to you in a flash like that. You can just casually throw it out in a meeting. Everybody got very excited about it. It's clear.
But clarity is all, and clarity communicates, and it doesn't surprise me that was effective. And it doesn't surprise me too, another friend of mine who has an MFA in poetry, went on to become a vice president of marketing of Saatchi & Saatchi, because he is so a maestro of these 10 words or less. And now he also has a very cool surfer brand, so you should check out Liberated China, or Panda Diplomacy, change to Panda Diplomacy. Anyway, we're running over time already, but I really wanted you to get to know your panelists, and now we're going to present the lovely and brave and wonderful Amy Thomas. As you can see in her bio, she's already published a book, and so she's basically our opening act. She's going to show you all how a professional does it, and I'm not going to take up any more time away from Amy. Please welcome Amy Thomas. One more thing, just so you understand how this is going to go. The panelists are all invited to comment in every single pitch, but nobody should be offended if one panelist really says everything that the other panelists wanted to say. We're going to try to keep the evening moving along very quickly. And so that's another reason why we're hoping that you'll loiter afterwards. You can approach the panelists. As I already promised, they're very nice. So if you feel like you really wanted a perspective you didn't get to hear, it's all in the name of you all getting a taste and then getting your own minds thinking and moving on. All right? Here's Amy.
So I promise to keep this moving and keep it quick. I have a few points to share as the pro pitcher, someone who's been doing this for over a decade. A few lessons I've learned and some milestones I'll share, and then I've got my pitch to share with the panelists. So just to go back in time a little, because even though I'm the pro pitcher, like pitching is you start new all the time, and even though you have the experience and you know the drill, like it's not always easy, and there's always a new learning curve, and that's just something to keep in mind. So to back way up, I went to business school. I spent a semester in Paris. I decided in business school, while I was having my semester in Paris, that I wanted to be a writer. I wasn't willing to start over, take out a loan to go to a new school and get an MFA or anything. So I decided I was going to get into either advertising or PR. I chose advertising and moved out to San Francisco, and I started my advertising career. So that was all great, and I was very lucky. I won't get into it, but had an auspicious beginning in the ad world. And then I decided I wanted to get into editorial writing. So this was the late 90s in San Francisco. I started doing some spec writing, and then this website called City Search launched, and they needed reviewers. So I started doing that. That was really the first, and that was through Craigslist. So San Francisco. So I started editorial writing. I had a book idea. I ended up coming to New York. I, in advertising, got laid off in 99 or 2000. Anyway, the dot-com bubble burst, and I came to New York, and I had these big dreams of being, a Condé Nast writer. And one of the first things I did when I got to New York, because I was so far from being a Condé Nast writer, was I took a class through Media Bistro, and Victoria happened to be my teacher. And it was truly a pivotal time for me, because I learned so much about the industry and what to do and how to craft these pitches. So from that class, I would say like the first pitch I sold on my own. I had a connection with Condé Nast. I did some writing for Lucky, so that was great. But the first pitch I did on my own that I was really excited about was to Time Out New York, and it was desserts for two, and it was timed for Valentine's Day. So, sort of the lesson there is, sort of writing about things that interest you. I'm a huge sweet freak.
Which is also the name of your blog, right?
Yes, I have a blog named Sweet Freak. And, so that's a whole other subject, just sort of following your passion, and things that come up at some point in your life tend to reemerge, and you should pay attention to those things. So I had this nice run in the early aughts where, I was focused. Like, it was something I was wanting and intentionally doing. Even though I had this advertising career, I knew I wanted, like, what really motivated me was the editorial writing. So I kept at it. I had a little success with publications such as New York Magazine, Departures. I started doing a little writing for the Times' blog called The Moment. And I would say all of that stuff came out of, it came from a place of being interested, having the focus and doing your homework and having the tenacity, because all that sounds great, and it is, but I won't even tell you how many places I pitched and was rejected, or it was radio silence. So it's not like, it's not like once you sell your first pitch, boom, you're in, and the rest is easy. Like, you just have to keep at it. And then for me, my biggest break was in 2008. Again, pay attention to these little things that keep resurfacing in your life. I was in Paris on vacation. They had just launched their Believe system, which is what we just did in New York with the city bikes. And I basically rode around Paris on these bikes. I mapped out about a dozen chocolatiers in the city. and I just mapped out a route, and I pedaled from like over 2 days. I just kept retracing the route and sampling the chocolate. And on a bold whim, I emailed this pitch to the travel editor of the New York Times, and she responded, and she was interested, and it blew me away. And so that went on to become a top 10 travel story for the New York Times in 2008. And then I established a relationship with this writer, and I've done a few other pieces for her. And over the past few years, I've definitely sort of focused my career on food and travel, because that's where my passion is. And so, on that note, tonight's pitch. my pitch is Brooklyn's chocolate moment. So 2 summers ago, a 70-foot-long schooner delivered 400 bags of organic cacao beans from the Dominican Republic to the Mast Brothers, a beans to bar factory in Williamsburg. It was perhaps the splashiest stunt in Brooklyn's chocolate-making history, but it's by no means the only action this borough has seen as of late. In Red Hook, Cacao Prieto has a similar model to Mast Brothers, with a charming brick factory that makes bars and bonbons from organic cacao and sugar from its own Dominican plantations. And this fall, Jacques Torres, Mr. Chocolate himself, will debut a 40,000 square foot Willy Wonka of a factory in Sunset Park. Amongst these giants are smaller but no less successful chocolatiers, including Tumabor, Nunu, and Fine and Raw. Though Brooklyn has been the food media's darling for months, there's been little said about this thriving chocolate industry. So the piece I'm proposing will spotlight the borough's delicious and impressive chocolate-making prowess, mapping out the must-visit factories and storefronts that are giving the borough a sweet taste of culinary success. It'd be a natural fit for autumn to coincide with Jacques Torres' factory opening. As for my background, I've written about Paris's best chocolatiers, the top 10 travel story for the New York Times, and also for the Times I've written a front page travel story on the chocolate scene in Brussels. And my book, Paris My Sweet, A Year in the City of Light and Dark Chocolate, introduced me to renowned Manhattan chocolatiers. And this chocolate scene in Brooklyn is bound to be a big story, and I want to make sure you're the first to cover it. I'll follow up with you within the next 10 days. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Excellent. Who wants to lunch it?
I am a huge chocoholic, so you're definitely preaching to a captive audience here. And that's another thing that I would say, that with pitches, it's really important to identify people from the outset that are going to be favorably disposed. I mean, especially because I worked as an agent for 5 years, and now you can speak to this too, but with all these mergers, you have fewer publishers and editors that you can go to. And so you really have to identify in advance who's the right person, say at an imprint or at a magazine even, to go to. Are you pitching this to newspapers and magazines? That's one question.
Actually, it's, yeah.
Okay. I thought the pitch was phenomenal. I loved it, except for the opening. The opening was a little dry to me. It was a little like, and this barge pulled off. I didn't know where we were going, and I was sort of disoriented. And then when you said Mast Brothers, I've actually had 2 friends of mine who live in Brooklyn send me Mast Brothers bars, and they're really great. So then you started, and then Jacques Torres was my favorite. So then you mentioned all the names, and I was like, ooh, and I thought, but I was thinking to myself, hasn't this been covered? Mast Brothers is a big deal. People know about Mast Brothers. But then when you talked about it more, you convinced me that it hadn't been. So that was really good. But at the beginning, I didn't know where we were going. So I wanted some overarching statement at the beginning, or something less sort of travel-army.
Okay.
Or maybe if she just had a great subject line for her email.
Yes.
Like with a killer title.
A killer title.
So then you're
Yes.
oriented and
Exactly.
then, yeah, and then you might
Yes.
step back.
That sounded like the beginning of a piece, but not the beginning of a pitch.
Okay.
To me.
I have a confession to make. I'm not a chocoholic, which makes me largely un-American. I hope I'm still invited. That said, I did appreciate the pitch, and what I would like to have a handle on is the number of venues. Maybe you mentioned it, but I didn't get it. To have a better sense of the scope, and maybe the diversity. So I really understand the landscape in a particular way. You know,
Types of chocolate and white and dark.
I agree with that.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that as well, because I mean, it is a compelling subject, but there is like I'm sure there's like one more thing that you're not mentioning that I know is there that does make it really like, wow, I didn't know that. Yeah, just like the subject matter. Yeah.
but also there's one more thing, because there are various travel kinds of guides, and there's the Zagat with the brief bio, and the store hours and the website, and then there's a more fluid blog type experience. So I think I'd want a better sense of the direction you're taking. Now, who is this for, really?
The craft approach, yeah. Like, is it going to be a list, or is it going to be another bike tour? And then the other thing, depending on, and of course, by the way, this is also a secret of successful freelancers, you may pitch it differently to every single magazine. But I always recommend that my clients pitch to their dream venue first. So if you want this to be with pictures and with a slideshow and, you know, whatever, like, I mean, Jacques Torres he's attractive, right? No, I ask this because the glossy magazines care. So, like, I'm sorry, if you're an unattractive guy and you're not photogenic, it's not going to get in. But if it's like, you know, like I'm thinking like these hairdressers that made it big, like Frederick Takai, whatever, half of it's not that he's better than anybody else, but because he's so damn photogenic. So if some of these people, like the Max Brothers, I think are kind of cute. So if you, I've seen a picture of them. So seriously, I know this sounds crass, but you got to think of all the assets that you have at your disposal. So and also your assets. So I know that you do great research, and if you wanted to go in more the narrative vein, then make sure you're pitching that to a place that would want that. Like, for instance, I know that, and I think they do it in the fall, the New Yorker, and I know this is big, but if you go for your dream venue, like the New Yorker does a shopping issue, I think like every fall, like to coincide with like Fall Fashion Week or something, and they occasionally do a roundup of unusual shops. And I'm sure that they usually have an in-house person doing it. But if it's not the New Yorker, somebody else too might be interested in something like that, and that might be very narrative oriented. Versus visually oriented. Whereas the New York Times has these great slideshows and stuff, and if there are a visual component, I would definitely highlight that. All right? All right, we're going to have to censor ourselves and keep things moving along. It's just too much good stuff already. All right, so next up we have Suzanne Cannon. All pictures, please be mindful of the tripod. Be mindful of the tripod.
Okay. All right. It is tough to follow a pro. I am Suzanne Gannon. Suzanne Gannon. Okay. And I'm here. I'm doing this for the first time. At the mock, you gain points by saying that. Victoria is my guide. All right. So I am pitching something that would fall into the realm of personal essay or book in a chapter being autobiographical, memoir-esque, I hate that word. The nugget of the piece would be, when I hit 45 1/4, it became clear that I was on track to record a life of 100% self-made mediocrity. And I surmised if I could hang on long enough for the second half to play itself out the way the first half had, I could get the job done in just under 90 years. So this epiphany happened without much warning, perhaps triggered by a tough year of lounging on my red velvet sofa while catching up on postseason baseball, professional bull riding, and Pakistani cricket, and guzzling Blue Moon for medical reasons that I will not disclose. Speaking of those poor Pakistanis, they've never been the same since Imran ditched them to pursue his political career. What a Pollyanna. So as I said, I am Suzanne. This little excerpt was taken from this essay/chapter book chapter entitled Missing the Mark. Tentatively it's entitled that. It would be roughly 3,000 words. I think it would be suitable, if not for a collection of essays, then for a national publication with sort of a cultural/psychoanalytical bent. The Atlantic comes to mind, as do other publications that are now escaping my mind. But it basically explores the themes that are being faced by this journalist who doesn't feel as though she has met all of her lifetime aspirations. She's a late in life journalist, meaning she came to the career very late in life. So it makes its way through envy and crises in confidence and a fear of narcissism and procrastination and all kinds of self-sabotaging tactics. I think it's a theme that would resonate with many different audiences, both men and women, both creative and commercial, entrepreneurs, inventors, middle-aged, old farts and otherwise, who feel regret or not. And ultimately, through this difficult journey, her sort of ultimate epiphany is that if she could, but besides finding a good map, the only way to arrive at a state of pure personal bliss is to find a way to accept myself as I am. The noise, the pressure to succeed, the unrealistic expectations, the desire to leave a legacy, all of which are, first world, fairly well off, fairly educated problems, fairly Caucasian problems. Desire to leave a legacy is not arising from the crowd on the sidelines. It originates in my head. I'm the one who moans about missing the mark, no one else. So it seems I have a choice. Turn off the noise, strive for fair to middling rather than exalted perfection, and relax because it seems I've already made it.
All right.
All right.
These are good problems to have. I would start by saying, as a journalist who has, you want to kind of anchor it with your street cred, and then the rest has better context. But you're pitching an excerpt in a larger work, and so I'm actually wondering about the larger work as an agent who doesn't sell the smaller pieces but the larger pieces, knowing, however parenthetically, that these books are hard to sell, anthologies generally are, or essays, but not impossible if you're David Sedaris. But, it's interesting because you did give it color. And on the other hand, you're talking about what's not extreme, the highs or lows. It's the very average, which typically gets lost in the shuffle. And so the challenge is to bring it to life, to make it important, because in fact it defines a whole lot of us. So that's the interesting thing here, that it really does speak to a wide bandwidth, depending on how you reach out. So there's enough basic, interest, because it has the potential to speak out to a lot of people, but there are these challenges.
I was thinking more magazine.
Yeah, I would say as an agent, seconding your point, the death knell for books is people who say I have a collection of essays. Seriously, it almost never sells, and you never want to come to an agent if you haven't published a book yet and say, oh, I have a collection of essays. You can't sell a book unless you've already published essays in magazines or journals. So I feel like it should be a magazine pitch first. And I completely agree with you that I was confused in the beginning because I didn't know what the cred was. And when you said that you were a journalist, I instantly said, oh, okay, this makes sense to me. I think you're so funny. Like, I love your presence, and I love your sort of self-deprecating humor, and I kind of see you doing a one-woman show.
Good, because she's working on that too.
Okay, good, because I really see that. Because there's a lot of self-deprecation that I think would actually get in your way as a writer, submitting a piece, and you kept saying like, oh, I sort of see the Atlantic or other publications that are escaping me right now. You would never want to say that to an agent, a literary agent, but it's funny as a one-woman show to say that, right? That you're sort of in over your head like, oh, psychoanalytic bet, you would never want to say that to an agent, you never want to say that to a magazine, you never want to use that phrase, but as drama, it's good. So I feel like you could take this in two ways. You could play up the kind of the lying on the red velvet sofa, the television, which to me, from a literary standpoint, didn't really work. I was confused. It didn't really resonate for me. And what I kept thinking when I put on my literary agent hat is I have a background in theater as well. So with a background in theater, I was thinking, wow, I really like this. I think this is very funny. From a literary agent standpoint, I'm thinking, where's the content? I feel like this is all pitch language. There's nothing that's giving me a sense of what your style would be as a writer. And when you were saying it would appeal to these people, it would appeal to these people, let the agent decide who it's going to appeal to. Exactly what you're saying. Or make the argument that I'm doing something new because I'm on talking about learning how to strive for the middle, which is funny, but don't tell us that it's going to appeal to everybody, just make that point. I feel like you need more content sentences from a literary standpoint.
Great. Liz?
Which I agree, I think, well, I love the subject because I love anything mundane. I think that's the most fascinating subject in the world. So I think right there you're onto something good. You are very funny and it is in your presence. And, you know, I'm not looking at this from a point of view of selling a piece of a literary piece because I just don't